you everybody for your patience. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you Esther Munoz, who formerly was a student in the department I taught in up at City College of San Francisco in the geology department, and wound her way through the educational system and found herself in the geosciences, much to my pleasure. And I am looking forward to hearing her story, and I will leave it to her to introduce herself more. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So as Katrin said, my name is Esther Munoz-Diaz. I just recently got my Ph.D. in Geosciences and Biogeochemistry. So today, if this decides to work, here we go.
You can use the arrow keys.
There we go. All right, so this is what I'm going to share today. So I'm going to share my demographics, a little bit of my childhood, my higher education pathway, what my PhD experience was like, where I'm at now, and where I'm going. All right, so starting with demographics. I'm Chicana. I'm Mexican American, born in San Francisco, California. My father was Nicaraguan. My mother is from Guadalajara, Mexico. I mostly identify with my Mexican heritage because I was raised by her. My pronouns are she, her, hers, ella. I'm the youngest of 7. I'm the first to seek higher education within my immediate family and the first doctorate in my extended family. I'm also trilingual, trilingual fluency in Spanish, English, and German, and some Portuguese, French, Russian, and Polish, but very little, so don't test me. So about my childhood. So I was born in San Francisco, California. From like the ages of 0 to 5. After that, we moved to Newark, California, which is right across the Dumbarton Bridge. And I spent, what's up? Oh, yeah, sure. I think I could do that.
That's what I was asking earlier, is how you, oh, video, there you go. But, okay, that was it. It just takes a second.
There we go. Cool. So then, all right, so yeah, I was in Newark from 1st to 9th grade. And in about 10th grade or so, we moved back to San Francisco, right? And oh, that's so weird looking at myself. I don't like it. Anyway, I spent about 2 years in San Francisco. I went to Mission High School over by Dolores Park. And I spent my senior year in Germany, which is kind of why I know German, right? So with all that experience in my childhood, all this moving around, you would think that maybe I'd be set up for success after high school, but that'd be wrong. I had a lot of trouble coming back from Germany because I was the first student at Mission High to ever do a study abroad. So they kind of didn't know what to do with me. And when I was trying to go to college, it didn't really work out for me. So I ended up taking about 8 years off, trying to kind of figure out my life and what I wanted to do. So what did I do? I traveled. I lived in LA for a few years. I worked, just trying to get some kind of like understanding of like what I wanted to do, because there wasn't really much of an expectation from me, right? Like youngest of 7, you kind of get lost. But after those 8 years, right when I turned 24, I realized that I needed to go back to school, although I didn't know what for. So I started in fall 2011. And so in hindsight, everything is 2020. So what I'm about to show you is just kind of like what I completed, right? So City College, I was there for 6 years, from 2011 to 2017. I got my AA in liberal arts with math and science. I got so many credits, they just had to give me something. Towards the end, I finally found geology or earth science, and I got a associate's to transfer in geology, which got me into University of California, Santa Cruz, which I was there for 2 years. There, I got my BS in earth and planetary sciences. That then took me to the last and final step of this academic journey, which was Penn State, where I was physically there for 5 years, technically still there, where I got a dual title PhD in geoscience and biogeochemistry. But let's break that down a little bit. So like I said, when I got to City College, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I actually found myself in a class similar to this when I first started there. It was called Chem 85, and it was very similar, where it's like a whole bunch of chemistry people with bachelors or PhDs in chemistry came in to talk to us about their path, what they're doing, how they used their degree in whatever career path they ended up in. So when I was in high school, I had said that I was interested in astronomy. And I was told that that wasn't for me. And so I argued my way out of all my science classes. And they let me get away with it because I was a good enough student. I was a jock. And they're like, fine, we'll let you get away with nothing. And that kind of hurt me at the end, because when I decided to come back, I decided to study astronomy because I kind of wanted to see what it was. Like, could I actually do this? And the department chair at City College at the time, Dr. Cal, had asked me a simple question, like, what's your interest? What do you want to know? What do you want to learn? And I was like, I want to learn or know more about how everything came to be how it is now. Like, how did we go from the solar nebular theory of how our solar system was created to our planets evolving over these, 4.68 billion years to where we at right now. He's like, that's something called astrobiology. He's like, or origin of life research. He's like, the good news is that you can basically study any pathway you want. Chemistry, biology, physics, anything can be applied to astrobio. The tough part is choosing which path. Now, because I didn't have a foundation in science, it took me a little bit. I failed a lot, but I was determined. But along the path, I got really lucky because I used a lot of my resources. So within the first couple of years, I actually landed an internship at NASA Ames, working in a chemistry lab for water recycling for the ISS. My mentor was Enid Contes de Jesus. She was Puerto Rican PhD from UC Santa Cruz, who really helped me feel welcome, because that was the summer of 2014. The spring of 2014, I had failed chemistry. And so the imposter syndrome was real. I was like, I don't belong here. Like, I was with all these other kids from R1 institutions like Harvard, Yale, Princeton. And here I was as a community college student who had just failed chemistry in a chemistry lab, working on the International Space Station kind of project. So it was rough, but it was a really amazing experience. But it also showed me that maybe not chemistry. So then I was like, let me do biology, right? And luckily, once again, using my resources at City, I got into this biology training program called the NIH Bridges to Baccalaureate 2-year summer program. For 2 summers, I spent 8 weeks at SF State learning biology techniques, whether it was growing E. coli or growing zebrafish, learning how to work with these types of organisms, model organisms is what we call them, and creating my own project to kind of learn, right? That was the first summer. The second summer, I got to work with Jose de la Torre, who is the only astrobiologist at SF State that works on extremophiles. Extremophiles are microbes that work on or live in extreme environments, right? And I remember when I met Jose, I was like, I don't know how, I don't know when, but I want your life, because he gets to travel the world and work in these amazing places. And honestly, it was through him that I got a lot of opportunities that I'm going to talk about later. But I also realized that biology wasn't my jam because I didn't like how competitive it was, because everyone was into medicine or pharmaceuticals or things like that. And I was like, this isn't vibing. And I remember it was in organic chemistry where I had a mental breakdown, and my partner at the time was like, all right, take a step back. If you could choose whatever classes you wanted without your guidance counselors, without all these people talking in your ear, what would you choose? And that's when I found earth science. And I remember when I walked into that room, I don't know if y'all have ever been to City College, but there's the earth science room that when you walk in, I know it kind of got destroyed during one of the storms, but there was like all of these minerals. There was a what is it called? A fossil. Yes, the plesiosaur. We had these footprints that one of the founding professors that was there in like the 30s came through and literally chopped off this like these footprints of these dinosaurs from some park, I forget where, tied it to his car, brought it to city, and it's been there ever since. It's been like almost 100 years. And I just felt like home. I was like, this is what I've been looking for. And it made me start questioning, like, how come there weren't as many programs for physical scientists? Like, especially with these outreach kind of things, like all of these opportunities that I had in chemistry and biology, they were everywhere, but I didn't see that in earth science. And I didn't see that in astronomy either. And I was like, that's interesting. But either way, I found my home, and took me about 5 years to finally find earth science. And I loved it. And so I used that to get to UC Santa Cruz, right? And so in my mind, I was like, all right, so if I want to do astrobiology, how can I set myself up to get the education that I want, as well as do the kind of research that I wanted to do? And so I figured that I could combine earth science with microbiology, also known as geobiology, to get into astrobiology. So since I only had 2 years, I had to kind of hit the ground running. And luckily I got into a research lab in the microbiology and environmental toxicology department with Chad Saltikoff. And I got to work on arsenotrophs and arsenophiles in Searles Lake, California. Searles Lake is a lake that is at the end of a ancient lake system that was once connected to Mono Lake. And this lake is one of the most concentrated in arsenic in the world. And so the question was like, how are things living in this environment? And like, I also wanted to understand the geologic history. So I combined both of that into my thesis for my bachelor's. And I was like, all right, cool, bet. Like that means that I am setting myself up to do geobiology so that I can then get into astrobiology, right? And none of this, I should say, was possible without Jose, because in that specific department, they did not allow undergrads. But because I was like, oh yeah, I work with Jose de la Torre, he was like, all right, I trust you. You know what you're doing. I'm gonna let you be in my lab. So there was that on top of the STEM diversity IMSD program, which is the Initiative for Maximizing Student Development, that also helped me. They gave me a cohort. They gave me other friends. It was great. Loved it. Wonderful time at UC Santa Cruz. Then we go to Penn State. Now, I remember when I had my first talk with my advisor, Christopher House. And he was like, look, Pennsylvania is nothing like California. He's like, specifically, State College is nothing like anything you've ever experienced. And in my head, I was like, but I've lived in Germany. Like, it must be similar to that, right? And he's like, if you say so. I've never lived there. He's like, I can only take your word. I'm like, all right. I was like, you know what? If I survived there, I could survive Pennsylvania. Yeah, that was rough. I won't lie. That was rough, on top of the fact that here I thought I was setting myself up for geobiology, but I ended up doing isotope geochemistry. And that was another thing my advisor told me. He's like, look, I know that this project is nothing that you're interested in. I know that it's nothing that you have any experience with. But as a graduate student, you want a project that's fully funded. Like on top of the fact that you're going to learn some really interesting things that you can probably apply later. And it's still tied to astrobio. He's like, so, we can have some middle ground here. Then he gave me my project, which was position-specific stable carbon isotope analysis of biorelevant molecules to distinguish between biological and abiological synthesis. And I said, I need a dictionary. So like, I mean, I know a lot of these words individually, but I don't know them together in this form. And it taught me a lot, because one thing that I didn't know beforehand was that there's different types of institutions called R1, R2, and R3. R3 is kind of like a community college, right? It's just teaching. R2 is like CSUs where you do research, but there's also focus on teaching. Then there's R1s where it's all about research. Their focus is not about teaching you. And that was rough because I was not used to that. I was used to coming from a community college where I knew all of my teachers and my teachers actually wanted to know me. I went to UC Santa Cruz where it was also similar. Yeah, that was more of an R1 institution, but it's also a Hispanic serving institution where I found so much community, people willing to help me, willing to talk to me, willing to teach me. When I got here, that was not the case at all, like not even a little bit. And so I had to teach myself what isotope geochemistry was. Mind you, I didn't take OChem. I dropped that class when I had that breakdown. So I didn't even know where to begin. It was rough, but I did it. Took me a minute, but I did it. And so quickly, for those of you that may be interested in my research, there's 3 slides only, all right? So I'm gonna try to keep this brief because it's hard. So I worked on a molecule called uracil. Uracil is a pyrimidine that's found in your RNA, right? And the idea here is that uracil came before thymine. Thymine is the T in your DNA. And so we know that uracil has 4 carbons, and we want to look at them specifically in each position to kind of figure out if there's like a pattern that we can distinguish. And so my main focus was to isolate at least 1 carbon, which is the one in the red box, that carbon 2 in carbon dioxide. So this whole method is the way to break down uracil to these 2 components, beta alanine and cyanate. Cyanate is unstable, so it breaks down into bicarbonate and ammonia. Bicarbonate at a certain pH is kind of going in between bicarbonate and CO2, right? And so that's what I was measuring. Now, why does this matter? Why uracil? Well, besides the fact that it's part of our RNA, we also have found it on meteorites and asteroids. We know that it is found in the solar system, just kind of like hanging around. Like, but the question is like, is it made biologically or is it made through chemistry, right? We also can make it, right? So that's kind of what I started my work in, was looking at the synthetically made ones that we make in the lab. We know where all the carbons are sourced from, right? Ideally. And we wanted to see if we can like kind of see a difference. Long story short, we could. So I ended up testing uracil and uridine. So what the difference between uracil and uridine are is that uracil is just this guy, right? Uridine has a sugar that's attached to it. Cytosine is also another type of pyrimidine, so it's the C version in your DNA. It looks a little different, but the composition is the same, just about. And I also did that with cytidine, did the same process, all that jazz. Long story short, The carbon 2 in the synthetic ones show that they're more depleted to the original version. And when I did this on RNA that was extracted from E. coli, we saw that the CO2 that it was giving off was actually more enriched. So we saw the opposite. So there is a difference. And we could technically use this as a way to kind of distinguish between biological and abiological sources for like moving on. Okay, so that was my research. So where am I at now? So I ran home in October of 2024. As soon as I finished my defense, I drove cross country with everything in tow, and then they cut my funding. So I had to start working in a restaurant. Then I got hired at San Francisco State as a program coordinator for this program called SF Build that's spearheaded by Leticia Marquez Magaña, who is also an old-time friend and advisor. And my job there is to overlook projects, and I get to mentor students that are on the path to either become medical doctors, MD, PhDs, or you know, community health related topics, which is very different than what I do, but it's kind of like the same path to a certain degree. Where am I going? So I actually start my postdoc at Stanford in July, where I'll be working with Paola Wielander on microbial gene evolution of thermophilic green archaeota from hot springs and marine hydrothermal vents, which is back to what I love to do. So this project that I'm going to be working on is basically what I wanted for my PhD. So I'm really excited. And I got really lucky because I met Paola at a conference called the Gordon Research Conference for Organic Geochemistry, which it was kind of a fluke that she was there because she's not a geochemist, but she was there because she leads a lot of biology kind of work. And I asked her to save me from Pennsylvania, and she did. And also, there's this other program called Postdoc Recruitment Initiative for STEM and Medicine that also helped me basically get the funding I needed to get me into Stanford for sure for a year. So yeah, that's kind of my path in a nutshell. Does anybody have any questions? It's also Selena's birthday. That's why she's here. Sorry. Right? I thought about it, but I was like, I don't know anyone enough. I'm gonna be all embarrassed. But yeah, so any questions? Yes.
Through lots of time and lots of diversity over time,
Yes.
there is required you to have an awful lot of something to go through all that.
Stubbornness.
I'm asking you to define what that something is. What was allowed you over long periods of time, lots of challenges, to be able to go from where you started to where you are today?
So the question is, for those online, is what helped me get through all of the time that I spent on this journey? And it really comes down to determination. Also, the more somebody said no to me, the more I was like, nah, watch me. Cause like that's what happened at grad school. My first exam, they tried to get me to master out because I didn't know enough. And I wasn't what they were looking for. And I said, no, I will not. I'm going to learn this some way, somehow. And even when my second exam, when they told me that they didn't like the way I spoke, my favorite line during that was, "Hey, Esther, don't you speak like 3 to 4 languages?" I said, "Yes. What's your point?" And they said, "Well, you need to learn how to speak this language too." And I said, "Bet." I still did not change the way I spoke. So yeah, definitely determination, definitely stubbornness. But also just because it's what I wanted. And a friend of mine also said to me a long time ago, he said, time is gonna pass no matter what you do. You know, like, what are you gonna do with that time? Like, you can quit. Because there are many times I wanted to just quit. And he said, you could do that, but think about the fact that when you do quit, that time is still gonna pass, that same time that you could be putting towards something, whatever that is. Just make sure that you're using it wisely. And so I think it was kind of like those words that kept me going a lot of the time.
Evelyn, she's on Zoom right now. She had a question. She said, how was it like going to school for 8 years?
It was
8 years later.
Oh, 8 years later. Okay, because I was like, I think it was 13 years in total. But no, it was not going to school for those 8 years. I mean, I was between the ages of 17 and 24. And so there was a lot of things that I was doing at the time because I was really depressed, honestly. I had a lot of culture shock coming back from Germany. And I felt really out of place and I didn't know where I was going because I thought I was going to go to college, but that fell through because of my transcripts. And then I got into martial arts and I did that for 5 years. And it was actually through the martial arts that I knew I wanted to come back to school. So just kind of like during those 8 years, it kind of gave me time to, in a way, find myself at that time, is what I would say. Yeah.
I have another Zoom question from Vanessa.
Mhm.
What is your biggest piece of advice when it comes to experiencing imposter syndrome, especially for people of color?
Oh man, look, everybody has imposter syndrome. Like there's no way about it. Especially when you find yourself in these spaces. And the thing is that you're there. Like you just have to recognize and realize that you're at where you prayed to be, right? Like, and it's just that reminder. You just, because you can't get rid of it. There's nothing that will get, you're always going to feel that way. Someone's going to make you feel some type of way. And it's just realizing that you're there just like everybody else is. And, you know, deserving is also just like very subjective. Point is that we made it, you made it, just finish, get through it because we can. Find your community to do that. Yes.
So I love your description of maybe if you don't know what you're doing, accomplishing something while you're doing it might, you know, make you just sort of feel better about your direction, might help you just sort of be productive. So that technique, I think, is part of what's kept you going through all these difficult times. It's like, well, the other option is not appealing. So I'm going to stick to this option and see what new doors open. And I think I've heard that in your story is a lot of new doors became available. And
Yes.
sometimes it seemed like you were doing completely a different thing than you wanted, but eventually the door you wanted came open.
Yep.
And it seems like part of that was your networking,
Yes.
right? So maybe you
Yes.
can talk a little bit about how you met those people and really built those relationships that eventually opened some doors for you.
Yeah, no, that's actually a very good point. I think because I was an older student, it gave me this ability to maybe talk to my professors a little easier. I wasn't afraid to see them as my peers and to stalk them, learn everyone's office hours, know when they were going to be there, have all my questions. I mean, I literally knew just about every single person in every department in the science building at City. I also kept those connections. I mean, how long ago was it that I was at City? And I'm here because of Katrin. You know what I mean? Like, we can't discount who we know at any given point in time. Letty, right, who got me at SF State. I met her in 2012. Why? Because I spoke to my Chicano studies professor about my interest in science, and he's like, you got to meet my homegirl Letty. Tell her I sent you. And I was like, what? And he's like, just email her. And I emailed her. She invited me to her office. She introduced me to Jose. And that's how that domino fell, right? Like, all just because I was confident enough to talk to my professors and to find the resources. That's another thing about community colleges, is that there are so many resources at community college. And you can also take your time in a way that you can't take your time when you are transferred onto a 4-year. Because a 4-year, and I met a lot of students there that went there straight from high school that felt stuck because they couldn't change their mind. I could change my mind at community college. I was like, let me do chemistry, maybe not. Let me do biology, maybe not. Let me go, like, I could do that. And I'm still friends with all of my professors throughout this entire journey. And those relationships have really opened up those doors. They have really helped when I wanted to get into something, name drop. Hey, I know Jose. Oh, you know Jose? I know Jose too. Let's work together. I think also just finding resources. The Mesa Center was a big supporter for me. I was part of a lot of clubs. So like, I was the president of the astronomy club. I took part in whatever I could to kind of get me the experience, because of the fact that I knew that it wasn't about my grades. My grades were not going to get me where I wanted to be. I was not a good student like that. Like, I'm not a 4.0 student. I knew that it was about who I knew that was going to get me where I wanted to go. And like experience, right? Like, I worked on, I think at this point, I worked on 4 different types of instruments that I had to master throughout my 5 years at, Penn State. But before that, it was all the biology techniques, growing microbes, knowing how to do PCR, knowing how to do all of these things also helped a lot in terms of looking good on paper.
I would follow up on that. You tried a lot of things. And
Yes, I did.
You did a lot of different research projects,
Yes.
much of which seems from from back here that maybe it doesn't have a lot to do with what you're doing.
Mhm.
Were there any of those where you're like, oh, I didn't learn anything useful that I'm still using today? Or were most of those something where even if you didn't realize it at the time, you picked up something that helped you with where you are today?
Yes, I would say that it all helps because science is all intertwined. And so a lot of the techniques, a lot of the instruments are used all across the board. For example, NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance, is used all across the board, biology, chemistry, like it's used for so many different things. HPLCMS, another one, very big in earth science. Isotope geochemistry, I mean, geo, right? Like, it's in there. That's been in it's been around for a very long time. And so it's given me a lot of insight on how to learn these techniques and apply them as necessary or as needed to whatever it is that I'm doing, or wherever it is that I'm going next, for sure. I think you had a question.
Yeah, it's kind of similar. I'm trying to, so whenever someone tells you, okay, there's this opportunity, if it's something that you're like, well, I don't know. It's not necessarily what I want to do, because I think sometimes in community college, some of the students like, I want to be engineering. That there's all these opportunities, but if it's not specific to what study, they don't go.
Yeah.
So how do you get past that? And I think you alluded to that already, so if you could expand on that. And then I also have a question that is different, but it's all this time, did you get any pushback or resistance from your family?
Yeah.
You know,
Yes, okay.
you know what I'm talking.
Yeah, no,
So-
I definitely do. Okay, so hold on. What the first question again was about wanting to know how I took on opportunities that were outside of
I'm doing.
my interests. Now, that stems from the fact that I always knew I wanted to do astrobiology, right? But astrobiology was just like the end goal. So I always knew my end goal, but I didn't know how I was going to get there. And so I took on opportunities to help train me in whatever it is that I needed to get experience of something, right? Like whether it was the chemistry or the biology. And I remember there was a time where they were pushing engineering on me, and I took an engineering class, even though I didn't want to, but I still did it because I still learned how to code. I actually met one of my best friends through that. And I was just like, well, this is just kind of part of it. I think I had accepted the fact that there was going to be a lot of things that I didn't want to do to get where I wanted to be. And I know that, might sound unhealthy to some people, but it was just something that I had just internalized. And I was like, look, I need to get through this to get where I want to go. Now, to your second question about the pushback from family, absolutely. They didn't understand anything. They didn't understand why I was going back to school at 25. I think one of the comments was like, your time to go to school is up. You need to focus on getting married and having kids. And I was like, nah, that's not for me. They also didn't understand what I was studying. Nor do they to this day, but that's okay. Nobody really does, but they've learned to support me over time, right? At the beginning, it was really hard because they didn't understand, why am I studying something that isn't going to make me money? Why am I studying something that, doesn't really have a common outcome, like being a doctor or a lawyer or, something like that. And I was like, well, what do you think NASA is? And they're like, oh, well, we never thought of it like that, because it's like not a place you see us in necessarily. And I remember when I first walked into NASA Ames, I thought it was very diverse, until I realized that all the diversity I was seeing was staff and not necessarily the scientists. So that was also a very interesting wake-up call for me. And also the fact that the PI to that project specifically told me that I checked off boxes. They're like, oh, you're a female and you're brown. That's 2 check boxes. You're definitely guaranteed a job. And look at your mentor. She's Black, brown, and a woman. 3 check boxes right there. And, I remember feeling very angry about that. But, that's kind of the reality of what a lot of people do think sometimes, and you just kind of have to push through that. And so you're going to get pushback, whether it's from your family or from people, whether it's your peers or even sometimes your PIs or your principal investigators, your bosses. And, it's not hard, but it's not easy. It's very hard, but I think that's kind of the name of the game, unfortunately. Any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned before, is that you went to those professor's office. What question will you bring?
Everything. Homework, exams. I would have them explain to me things that I couldn't understand, like in chemistry. One of my professors, and also still one of my friends, Dr. Wong, I literally lived in his office. Especially after I failed chemistry the first time. I would sit in his office and I would do my homework in there. And if I had a question, I would ask him to explain things to me in a way that I could understand. Because that was another thing, is that I don't understand, how do I put this? I heard it put it like this once, and it's like, I don't speak Caucasian in the sense that there's a certain level of English that I have a hard time understanding in textbooks, and I need it to be broken down so that I can understand. And so I would go to my professors to have those conversations. Like, I need you to explain to me what this means in English that I can understand.
Is it the case when you are in community college?
Yeah, and I did that at UC Santa Cruz too.
But when you transfer to a big college, that may be not the case.
I did it at UC Santa Cruz as well. I got to know everyone, but not at Penn State. Penn State was different.
So how do you, how do you get know the professor?
At UC Santa Cruz or at Penn State? Well, I tried the best that I could. But COVID was had a big aspect to that like I didn't get to meet a lot of people for the first 2.5 years. I also realized that there are a lot of professors that I just didn't want to get to know. And that's why I said that when I was there, I had to teach myself. There's a lot of teaching myself, a lot of finding the people that actually cared to teach me. I had to find them, which wasn't easy, but they're there, right? Ended up being my lab managers. Two of my lab managers who, wow, like I feel like they should have been my advisors. And you know, you gotta ask, you gotta knock on doors, you gotta like just talk to people, not be afraid to talk to people, which I know I think is easier said than done. But you know, you start like, hey, I see you work on this. Can I come meet you at your office? Or can like I ask you about, you know, this instrument? Can you show me how to use this instrument? Because a lot of times they will send work off for somebody else to do, right? And I didn't want that. I actually wanted to learn how to use these instruments. And I actually fought with my advisor about that because he wanted me to send things off. And I said, no, I want to learn. And so I would email these people, teach me how to use the NMR, teach me how to use the HPLC, teach me how to use this, teach me how to use that. And so that's kind of how I circumvented that at Penn State.
What I heard about is, you probably can read search their names on the website,
Mhm.
find their paper, and
Yep.
take your paper and ask the question for that paper.
Yeah, you could do that too. I didn't do that. But a lot of people did, you know, and that's a good way to do it because, you know, it shows interest, it shows that you did your research on them, right? And you kind of know what they've done. I did that mostly when I was applying to grad school. So when I was doing my applications for grad school, the advice that I was given was to look at the people that were doing the research that I am interested in and email them, create a point of contact. Because a lot of the times it's about who you know. Because if they know that you're applying and you've already made that connection, they look for your application. They're expecting it. And so they'll pick it from the pile and be like, hey, I'm interested in this person. Or, you know, whatever. And also it gives you an idea if they're even taking students, right? Instead of going in blindly thinking that, oh, well, they'll definitely take me in. No, it's better to always create a point of contact, ask those questions ahead of time, read those papers, see if what they are doing aligns. Now, in my case, they had stopped doing the work that I was interested in. So they used to do it. And then he was like, nah, I'm pivoting to this. And he's like, sorry, but it's funded. So if you're up for the challenge, I have a spot for you. Anybody else?
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther. Who's Raymond? Sorry. Okay, but in terms of like, I should tell people this. Okay. For those of you who aren't aware, there are